My Lords, I can only speak briefly in support of my noble friend, Viscount Trenchard. It was commonly known and widely reported in the newspapers at the time that following the financial crash of 2008, the EU, which has always had its doubts and scepticism about what it referred to as Anglo-Saxon finance, indeed hostility to Anglo-Saxon finance, withdrew the indulgence that it had previously shown towards the City of London as part of the European Union and started to enact legislation which was injurious to the City of London, and quite deliberately so, and to the annoyance of the Chancellor of the Exchequer at the time, George Osborne, who was reasonably open about his opposition. And this instrument, the Alternative Funds Directive, was perhaps the prime example of that. There were others. It was the prime example of that, and it contributed significantly to the fact that there was much more opposition, much more support for Brexit in the City of London than people often wanted to admit at the time or have admitted since, because they understood that that oppositional turn had taken place and the tide was now flowing against the city. So I agree with my noble friend that it's very difficult to see why, now that we have the opportunity to remove it, we continue not to do so year after year. And there are other examples. But I'd also like to support the remarks of my noble friend, Lady Lawler. There is an idea that is prevalent, and it's not just in financial legislation, that as we get rid of European Union legislation that we no longer need, that we need to replace it with legislation that almost replicates what the European Union was doing. A prime example of this at the time, outside the field of financial services, was the Procurement Bill, a massively complicated piece of legislation replicating European Union legislation almost in great detail, whereas in fact the procurement legislation of the European Union, which was obviously designed for 28 states, not simply for the United Kingdom, was there largely to deal with problems embedded in a history of municipal corruption, which were manifest in various European states, though happily, I'm glad to say, of which the United Kingdom has a long, proud history of being pretty free, one or two exceptions, but pretty free. It wasn't necessary to replicate it in the detail in which it was done. So there are genuine concerns, I think, certainly amongst those of us who are on this side of the House, that insufficient dispatch is being brought to getting rid of injurious legislation that we have inherited from the European Union, but which we can now get rid of, and that there is a mentality that the right way to get rid of something is simply effectively to reenact something very similar after a period of consultation. So I have great sympathy with what my two noble friends have said, and I hope the Minister, when she replies, will be able to give them some comfort.
My Lords,